Okay. Welcome everyone to this Mayor's Task Force on Infrastructure meeting for Thursday, April 4th, 2024. Call this meeting to order. I apologize for being a few minutes late. Welcome. The first item here is approval of the agenda. I'll look to our clerk for the addition of any late items.
We received a list of capital projects by email. With 4.2.
Okay, great. So those will be received in 4.2. Can I have a motion that the Mayor's Task Force on Infrastructure approve the agenda and late items for the April 4th, 2024 meeting? Moved by Councillor Wake, seconded by Mr. Florendo. Moving on to adoption of the minutes. Can I have a motion that the minutes of the Task Force on Infrastructure meeting held March 8th, 2024 be adopted? Moved by Councillor Wake, seconded by Mr. Nicholson. Any discussion, corrections, amendments? Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hand. Say aye. Aye, that carries. Oh, great to hear your voice, Councillor Saunders.
It's just splendid to be here.
Looking to public comments. Do we have any public comments this afternoon?
No public.
Okay, seeing none. Moving on to item 4, business arising from the minutes. We have 4.1, the proposed public works yard project, and I will look to the Director of Engineering for comments on the recommendation here.
Well, it's something that we discussed at the last meeting of this committee, that we've been through a process with an architect-led team. They've produced 50% design and cost estimates. And then subsequently, we've followed up with a design build contractor that does steel buildings. They've proven to be able to do that very efficiently with the fire hall project. And they've provided a proposal. And the first part of moving forward with their proposal would be to essentially have them develop enough design to provide a fixed price design build proposal. The works yard building and the related upgrades. And so that's what we're hoping that maybe we need some additional discussion beforehand, but we're hoping that this committee can make that recommendation to take that next step.
Okay, I will open it up to the floor for comments, questions, and discussion then. Okay.
Just as a point of clarification, we're also going to be discussing this in a closed meeting as well?
Not necessarily. I don't think we have the works yard on our closed agenda.
For 3.1.
3.1, yes. So great. Actually, this is a good time to talk about it. So we're getting too much in the public realm into the closed agenda. There are a number of items on this agenda that are mirrored in the closed. My preference generally is to keep as much as possible in open. So I will, if the conversation treads into issues that might be better dealt with in closed, or would, I think the language of the charter is to harm municipal interests. I'll look for staff to recommend or just, make motion to me that that item is probably best left closed. But right now, let's just assume that most of the, whatever we start with can be discussed in open.
Okay. You were sort of looking at me to kind of lead this up. We haven't really corralled this, but I'm happy to. I had a question. I have to find my notes, but I had a question about the Liberty proposal, Patrick, with respect to the and I guess Liam, with respect to the program. Are we comfortable that the areas that are being allocated for the various, well, first of all, do we feel like we've nailed down the program, the functional program, that you've got all the spaces that are sort of required now, but maybe a little bit of wiggle room for the future? Do you feel the program that Liberty's put forward encapsulates everything that we'll need? That's the first question, I guess.
Yes.
Okay.
Essentially, a lot of time was put into that, the early stages of the work with
Yeah.
Casey and team in 2021.
Right.
The space is required and expansion and a program that the building and site wants to see. So the Liberty proposal use those areas.
Okay,
So
great.
they
Okay, found my notes. I was stalling there for a moment. That wasn't a misleading question, but anyhow, so that's good. So we're comfortable with the areas. And so I had a note about, and this is going to add to the cost, but kind of my personal mission, personal / quasi used to be professional, was maybe we could ask them, putting this out as a point of discussion, to make the building at least structurally post-disaster. So there's more robust frame to it. Not an actual post-disaster building, but at least the structure, as I understand it from my experience, in the institutional buildings that we used to do, the incremental cost to make it a more robust structure relative to the overall project cost is not, doesn't hit you too much in the pocketbook, so to speak. That was one point. And another was, do you think given that, well, I guess I hope we might get an opportunity to see the design as it evolves from Liberty? Because one of the thoughts I had, and maybe it's misguided, but would we in any way, shape or form need some sleeping accommodation there? Space for whether there's like a loft or something if crews got called out and then couldn't get back home. I'm thinking in an emergency situation where they had to bunk there. Get any traction with you or what?
we hadn't included sleeping accommodation in the program.
Yeah, no. Well, I just thought in the design of the spaces, would there be some possibility
Bunk
in?
in the garage, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's spaces.
Oh, yeah, there'll be space in the garage. That's true.
Emergency,
Yeah,
you can
yeah.
use.
Right.
It's just not set up as
Yeah.
a purpose built.
Okay. And it'll be, I guess it'll be electrically energized, like electric heat, either furnace or something. It's not, won't be, there's no going to be no cutting edge green. Yeah. Okay. Last thing, and septic's okay? Septic field's okay to take?
Septic field is relatively new. And it was designed for our works yard plus the Metro Vancouver.
Okay, so, okay. And did Metro put that in or did we? Split cost or something?
The split cost, I think we might have managed the
Okay.
project. Share.
Last note I had, it had to do with the site-specific issues of the site and the gas station, and looking at the plan, I guess the gas station, they're leasing that from the muni. They look like the gas station site is part of the municipal property. That's correct. It's good to say. And it is my sort of wild hallucinations, if you will, in an emergency earthquake or whatever. Actually, it was derived from Taiwan. We had just had that major earthquake. Is the service yard tank, gas tank, seismically up to snuff? Do we know? Like, I was just thinking if that thing rolled off its mounts, was punctured, it's near Davies Creek, talk about community harm or environmental harm, just
The gas station one or the?
whatever, either, like the tanks that are holding fuel.
Yeah.
Are they, sometimes I've seen they'll make a protection barrier around the oil stuff. So just we should fix that if it's not we should include that in the budget if it's not properly.
I don't know about the gas station.
But because they're a tenant, I think we would have some leverage on, getting that done. We don't have, and certainly from my perspective, in an emergency, people are gonna want fuel, whether it's for their standby generators or for municipal vehicles, if we don't have a link to the mainland.
Yeah,
Those are all the kind of thoughts I have at the moment. Anyway.
Dwight?
Questions, if that's all right.
Sure.
On,
Yeah, go ahead.
with regards to the cost estimate there, the 27,000 fee proposal from Liberty, right, to develop the detailed fixed cost estimate for a design build delivery for the project. That's for the current approved program only. Right?
It's for the current program.
Yeah. So anything else that we would add to it, that number would change because they would have to take that into account. Right?
Probably change.
Okay. And then that, I'm trying to recall when they gave us that fee proposal. Sometimes there are, I remember, so there's like, that could be changed already, that number, or are they gonna, if they're gonna hold that number?
I believe so.
Okay.
Had some recent, brief correspondence with them, and they're just, it was more along the lines of, how are things going? Are you need our assistance?
Yeah, are you still wanting to do this job type of thing, right? And then in terms of timing, we greenlight them to start on that cost estimate. How quickly will they be able to finish that? So we have a number at least to figure out what the future's gonna hold for us.
Once. I'm just guessing, no, I'm not sure. I don't know if they put something in there.
Like fee proposal.
I know one of the factors is like 2024 is like well underway for them. And so the longer we delay, the busier we get in the construction season. Then realistically, the sooner that we can secure their services, the better.
6 to 12 weeks.
Okay, that's not bad, 3 months.
Yeah.
And then, did they give you any indication of where they're seeing price escalation right now? Because it's been a couple of years, I would think, since Hanscom.
Yeah, I mean, this is from September, so that was, they would have been looking at prices from last November and current market. I haven't had much conversation with them since then. It's essentially been on hold. To be able to discuss, what have the trends been from last September till now.
And then maybe gap wise, like when they give us that fixed cost estimate, right? There's typically, assumptions that they would make, right? As certain things. How are there any kind of large cost items that they would have to make an assumption on that has some volatility in terms of pricing when they actually get to do the work? Are there any gaps there in the scope of that estimate? From your review of that? Like, 'cause sometimes they'll say, like, the worst thing you see on a plan is like by others, right? And so is there anything they're assuming that someone else is going to be doing that they don't necessarily need to incorporate into that cost that we may have missed?
I think the building costs are pretty solid. They did make an assumption about contaminated site permitting and contaminated soil removal. So that, I suppose, is a bit of a risk factor that could escalate. I think the other ones are, I mean, it is based on a fairly well-developed preliminary design anyway, a 50% design level. So I think it's the rest of the program is pretty solid.
Is there anything else that we could be doing with regard to characterizing the level of contaminants on the site to get a better understanding of like quantity that will need to be needed?
I think we've done what we need to do to essentially confirm that the soil on the site needs to be, you have to make the assumption that it's contaminated.
Yeah.
And so where there might be efficiencies is, can the design be modified to reduce or reuse more material on site and reduce the amount of excavated soil that has to be trucked off site. I'm not sure if there's a way to get more granular in terms of, well, soil in this part of the site is, we can assume that it's not contaminated and it can be just disposed of on island.
Right. So essentially the level of excavation for the project is being limited as much as possible to the building footprints as opposed to like any of the exterior parts where you don't necessarily have to go deep? Or is there a level of excavation all the way across the site and that quantity is going to be included in the, you might as well assume the largest quantity. So
Yeah,
I'm surprised when it costs less as opposed to.
It was based on, that was part of the design work that has already occurred, was looking at minimizing excavation. So to really what's required for the buildings.
Those are my questions. I think, that's probably, it sounds like that money is probably good to spend to figure out where we're sitting.
Okay. Councilor Wake.
There's not much detail here on the admin portion attached and the admin portion adjacent. The two schemes that we've got here.
Okay.
I'm just wondering, the trailer, I assume the admin portion is the trailer that we're using, that we have there now. So if it were attached, if it were adjacent, would we keep the same trailer? And are we leasing that trailer or are we?
Yeah, we're leasing it. Being rented, so.
So in the attached scheme, that trailer goes back to the rental agency. Or are we keeping it for, not keeping it?
No, the intention would be that it's not permanent.
Yeah.
And it would be, it wouldn't necessarily be the same. The amount of space that's needed is more than what that single trailer provides. So it wouldn't necessarily be the same size trailer or maybe a couple of trailers. That would need to be figured out. So even in the, it's likely that trailer would go back to the company in any case.
Okay, and I mean, generally, with the admin portion attached or included, generally the costs are a little more than if the trailers were adjacent. But there's one line here, the 600 wood and plastics, which is actually higher in the adjacent than it is in the included or attached. About almost double. I just wondered why would there be more costs to have it outside?
There's very little wood and plastic in the proposed buildings, which would be steel. And there would be some involved with constructing trailers.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Like a pressure treated foundation or something to lift it up level with the building or something like that?
That could be something that's included in this, yeah.
If you want the scheme of things, it's not that much. And you haven't given us any, what's your recommendation? My personal thought is that we should put it all in one building and not have an add-on, and the price difference is not huge. So what are your thoughts on that?
That would be my recommendation, is that we construct a building that meets all of our needs, or having
Yeah.
trailers on site. Work with a lot of service yards where it's essentially evolved as a collection of trailers.
Okay, thank you.
To the CEO.
So thank you for this, Patrick, and to the committee members for your questions. And I'm just thinking about process and advancing this in the context of other comments that we've had from council members. And geez, it was at least a year ago now, I think. I think that if we do advance this as is, I would recommend that we put together a staff report for the council that summarizes basically where things are at, rather than it just coming forward as a recommendation with the Liberty proposal attached, but just having a brief staff report that would support the recommendation with providing a very brief background on the work that's been done to date when we first worked with the previous architect, Casey, thank you, Casey, and then following council's initial feedback, we then did some additional work with Liberty, and through that time, we also explored all the other potential sites on the island, and just so that it's all wrapped up nicely in one summary report, and then the recommendation to council.
I would agree with that. I would I think a good process would be in other organizations as well, is the staff report would originate in committee and have the recommendation attached to it, because this will go to council. The recommendation will go to council, the report would go to council. But there's a few pieces I think that will be helpful for council to take in, but as well as the committee to see, tie off any loose ends. I think given the current infrastructure climate that we're seeing, in the region and probably the province and nation right now, some discussion of procurement or contracting types. So, why design build is better than what we've been doing previously, or why that would be better than any other alternative right now. I know that other municipalities and other jurisdictions are exploring various novel procurement methods. So I think that would be helpful for council to read an analysis on. The other piece I think that would be helpful for council to see is the consideration of alternatives. So what I would be hesitant to do would just be to send this recommendation with Liberty's sort of glossy folder to council and say that that's what we've made our basis on. I think there needs to be some discussion from staff as to why Liberty's the best, why we don't have any other proposals that are going to come before council, and why we haven't looked at those, or if we did look at those, what they are, as well as some broad overview as to timelines and milestones. So while this is a recommendation for $27,000, what it's really kicking off is a process that's ultimately going to cost the municipality $3 million, give or take. That's going to require assent voting from taxpayers as well. So given that, I think council and even this committee, in order to really make an informed decision, we need to see what that timeline is. So here's the design build. Here's where the $27,000 is being spent. Here's what happens next. Here's where the other costs are going to outlay in major milestones, leading all the way up to completion and occupancy of the facility. I think those elements in a staff report that has the ultimate recommendation is something that the committee should see and council should see before we move forward. I'm happy to take any other considerations or opinions on that. But it just feels like we need a bit more of a fulsome report from staff if we're going to send it back to council and as a committee or as a task force say that, you know, we've really given this all of our thought. Staff comments and the staff report here. Here's all of our analysis. It's going to kick off a $3 million process.
Should we be passing a motion to that effect, this committee, or is that, because it's coming from you, is that
Right.
enough of a?
So the motion could be to postpone, you know, really the way that we've set up the terms of reference of the committee. I mean, staff can come back with such a report and we can, look at it at the next meeting and then approve the recommendation from there.
Oh, I see. Well, I would, yeah, I mean, I would be all more for expediting as much as we could, because it has dragged on, it appears to have dragged on.
Right.
So whatever we could do to expedite it as a committee, be helpful to council. In principle, it sounds like the way to go to me.
Right.
Would it help?
Well, I think that as an example, what you're talking about, it doesn't really need to be a huge wholesome comparative analysis. If we just explain it the way we did just before the meeting, then the KCM price included a bunch of other things. And we wanted to make sure that they were included in Liberty's bid. And with those, the KCN bid was more like 4 million, wasn't it? Or estimates, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're looking at $1 million less to do this in a fixed price contract. So I guess I'm trying to make this a little easier for Patrick to be able to expedite the process of getting that back to us.
I mean, I think we could do that from a process standpoint. If there's a commitment from staff to undertake that. So because what I imagine, so here's what I imagine is from the process standpoint is that if we pass this recommendation, what happens is it gets put on a council agenda and then that agenda package gets sent out to councilors. And if in that agenda package, there's no report, but it's just like Liberty's proposal and sort of a verbal update as to what's going on. There's not the opportunity, given the context of all the other business on an agenda, for a council member who's reading that agenda and reading that agenda package to, come to that meeting with a relatively fully formed idea of what they want to do, or what their thoughts are, what their opinions are, what their questions are. And then it just leads to more of at a council meeting when we've got 10 or 15 minutes to deal with a piece of business, it just gets really fuzzy because we're just asking, it turns into a committee meeting in the middle of the council meeting.
And I think it'll also help the public gain the level of comfort that you seem to be getting with it. And because it's a pretty difficult environment right now, we're gonna have to borrow money for this project. And we need elector assent. And so I think being able to provide the public also with a report that has a bit of a summary, and I agree, it doesn't need to be exhaustive. I think it can be fairly straightforward, like a summary of the process to date. Just, that initially started with looking at design by KCN, which was likely moving towards a design bid build procurement model. And during that process, we looked at the various sites on the island, the Salal Yard, and I'll summarize these bullets and ideas for you, Patrick, and send that to you. We looked at Salal, we looked at the old fire hall, we looked at the existing works yard, and just laying that out will, I think, help inform the public that the due diligence has been done in one nice little package, because right now it's a bit spread out. I do really appreciate your desire to help expedite and move it forward, because I agree it has dragged on for a long time, and but I think that in order to get the support that we're going to need from the entire community, I think it would be helpful to have that summary report.
Well, and we do have the fire hall as an example of the work that they, that Liberty's done, so. My last question, if I may, was just to reconfirm that I noticed in the Hanscom report, there's depending on how you look at it, between 20 and 30 exclusions. You feel quite confident you've covered enough of that and given Liberty an amount to put in to cover the kind of stuff they're talking about, the hazardous materials, demolition, office workstations, slope stabilization, kitchen appliances, financing, loose front, this tier that Hanscom had. You feel Liberty's got that, you've given them an amount you're comfortable with? Or
Yeah,
good, okay.
the other big item that isn't in the 3 million you see in the Anscombe report is any kind of contingency.
Oh,
So that's a big part of.
yeah.
It's over in the staff report as well as the.
Right.
Assuming 20% contingency, that's another 600,000.
Yeah.
Maybe a couple more, just quick questions, recommendations, looking through Liberty's proposal here, there's essentially 4 components, right? They're gonna finish the schematic design. Then they're gonna do the session, value engineering session, and then complete the interior design and then prepare the budget. So is there an opportunity, and I think maybe this is part of when you go back to Liberty to request an opportunity to have a chance to review the value engineering report if they're going to produce a report to show where, this is what was in the original design, here's our recommendation, here's the savings, etc. To have an ability to have that report reviewed, prior to them moving forward with the design. And then in their design completion and outline spec past, it did exclude any mechanical electrical engineering design. So I'm assuming that's going to use the numbers that Hanscom has to their estimates. And then the budget completion, they didn't specify what kind of contingency, and likely it's going to be 20%, maybe it might be smaller. And lastly, in their next steps, design build award, is there a potential to put provisions in the design build contract for like a performance bonus if they're able to bring the price in within a certain range, they get a bonus on their costs, right? So it drives them to find the most efficient way to build the site project.
Are public entities allowed to do that? I know in the private sector it's allowed, but is it allowed to do that bonus incentive? Are you allowed to do that in public sector?
Well, I wouldn't. Yes, you can. The difficulty with that is that you pay for it upfront, right? And so it's not an uncommon practice, usually in larger scale projects, to have whether it's budget or schedule incentives, and but you pay for that upfront. So that would increase the project cost.
Well,
It'd be worthwhile to talk to them about it if there is, right?
well, interestingly, I don't know if you're done, Michael, but they said they had the staffing available immediately.
Yeah.
So they may be hungry for, or who knows how hungry they are now, but it sounds like.
Sorry, I don't mean to. They are a very active company. And they have, as you alluded to, proven their ability here on Bowen. So they understand the environment, which is great.
Yeah.
And they worked on that fire hall project on time, on scope.
Right.
They're very good. And that's the general sentiment in the community, in this construction community, about their performance abilities. So.
Okay, so what I might suggest then is we can move the existing recommendation as is. I would also add some language Oh, I got something too.
I saw you typing, I thought, don't take my job, AI. It's confusing when Liam's here because DQ can direct staff. It's nice to get a recommendation.
Right.
Direct staff.
Right, so I mean, it's just an encouragement. So let's deal with the original recommendation first, that the mayor's task force on infrastructure recommend the council direct staff to engage Liberty Construction Group, develop a detailed fixed cost estimate, design build, cost of $27,000 for construction of the proposed public works yard. The mover for that recommendation. Moved by Councilor Wake, seconded by Mr. Nicholson. Any discussion on this? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
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 Thank you, Councillor Saunders, and that carries unanimously. And then I would add a second recommendation that's more of a, because technically we can't direct staff at this table, but for the sake of expediency, sends a message that we would like certain things to occur prior to this reaching council. A motion that the Mayor's Task Force on Infrastructure recommend a staff report be provided to council along with the recommendation that contains a summary of the process to date, a briefing on procurement method, a summary of alternative sites, an overview of project timelines, and an analysis of contractor selection. And I will send that to the clerk. So she has it, but I just tried to pull together some of the items that we talked about to have some sort of formal list that staff would be able to work on. Seconded by Councillor Wake. Any further discussion on this recommendation? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay, thank you. Moving forward in the agenda, we have items 4.2 as well as 5.1, which all deal with capital projects, both capital projects review as well as a verbal update on capital projects. In discussing with the CAO that there's some substantial overlap between those two items. Unless there's any objection, we're going to deal with both of those together and then I will look to the Director of Engineering or possibly our CAO for any initial comments on these items.
I hope to get this list circulated earlier, but it was circulated late.
This one?
It summarizes status of estimated completion for the major projects that's in capital works. Probably could have shortened it. I noticed in our terms of reference, we were talking about a $150,000 threshold for the types of projects that this committee would be interested in development. So we do have a number that are underway this year and some of which are spanning into next year. We've got also some major projects considered for next year, biggest one being the works yard that we've already talked about. Maybe the best way to do this would be to go line by line through each of the projects to ask whether there's any particular projects that members would like to discuss in more detail or have questions about.
Right.
And I would like to add that the community center is not on this list because it's not in Patrick's department. So that's also a major project, as you all know.
Right.
And happy to provide a status update on that.
That was on another, that's on another sheet. Community center.
Right, so maybe
Capital asset funding requirements list.
maybe what we'll do, yeah, and the community center is contrary to all views of the roof. Contrary, it's nearing completion-ish. Whereas some of these are newer projects, so maybe we'll get depending on time, we'll look for an update of the community center. Look at some of these items.
Sure.
And I'll provide some framing comments here as to where we can go with this, as well as the capital program materials that were circulated to the committee for review. This is a very helpful list to the director of engineering, seeing everything in a 2-year time frame. Just a high level. This is the budget and this is the status of it, as well as an estimated completion. I would love to see a list like this at every meeting, and whether you want to shorten it to the pieces that are just $150,000 or greater, it would be nice just to have a rolling sense of where we are in projects at a very high level as a bit of a snapshot. What I would encourage the committee on is if you have questions about specific projects, I think we can look at those. But given that we're a new committee beginning to find our way, if there's items or thoughts here about the way that we can work that will that committee members are interested in, or that we'd like to add to our work plan, or ways that we should be looking at this moving forward, I think that would be a good place to start as well. Me, for example, when I look at to give you like an example, when I look at the cost of roads that are coming up. So roads and culverts, which are big expenses in 2025, for example, we've got, $1 million there, or $2 million listed there. Like, I would love for this committee to be briefed on the roads program. And given that we're increasing taxes so significantly over the next 5 years, and a lot of that money is going into public works, it's like, okay, well, what does our roads program look like? And can we get up to speed on that in a way that when things come forward to council, we'll be able to provide them some advice. So that's one of the ways that I would look at this list. I'm curious as to what thoughts of other members of the committee might be.
I just, for me, I just read the list and then I just tallied it up. It's a big numbers, right? 34 million all in. But, and then I went back to I tried to reconcile with the long-term capital funding, but I wasn't able to do that. So I don't have, I guess the only question I would have is, you built in a healthy contingency in the budgets, I'm assuming.
Budgets include contingency.
Yeah, that would be the only question I've got.
Yeah, so a couple of questions. One on the budget column here as well. That's the approved budget, right? That's not any forecasting for any overages or anything. That's the approved budget that the project has been associated.
It's a combination.
Okay.
Some projects have approved budgets, like the water main projects, for example, that are listed. Other projects, like the service yard upgrades, are, as we discussed, still an estimate stage. Similar, like the wastewater outfall replacement. I mean, we're in the process of going through the approval to borrow that money, but until the money's actually borrowed, can't really call it an approved budget.
And maybe one thing for some clarity's sake is if there is a way to like differentiate what are approved budgets, what isn't, whether it's bold because it's approved or it's italicized because it's still in the works. And maybe to help us identify hotspots, maybe highlight potential projects that are getting close to potentially an overage on the budget, right? Because then it draws our attention to like these potentially are the problem projects. Not every project's perfect, but maybe these are the ones that we can provide some input into. And I always find that knowing about a project prior to it starting gives us the best chance to provide guidance to it and get it started off. So thank you for putting later years here as well, right? Because then there is an opportunity there to be able to say, okay, what are some of the things that, especially on the safety improvements there at Trunk and Miller Road, close to $1 million. Is there anything there that, you know, could get some benefit from us as a task force to provide?
And then what, just to tease that out a little bit, because I do think that that's, would be a great idea to see, you know, just in a rolling way as these meetings go, because the minutes of these meetings and the reports of these meetings will also be received by council. Like, in your experience, what's a valuable way to display that? Is it just like a gut reaction, green, yellow, red, or just a?
Yeah, I mean, that's the simplest way is like if something's going well, then, you know, it's either not highlighted or it's green. And if there are projects that, you know, there are potential issues that we're anticipating, and yellow, there's stuff that's already in the toilet. Red, and like that's the ones we hone in on, and we can probably help. Try to keep it as simple as possible.
That's right.
So on the multi-use path, we've got completion in March 2025 of Artisan Lane to Charlie's Lane. Do we have the funding for that? Do we have the grant funding for that? Or are we still applying for it?
We have the grant funding. It still requires some of our own funds, but we do have funding for those.
Okay, and then in the later years, the Charlie's Lane to Bowen Bay Road. So the pre-design is complete for Charlie's Lane to Grafton Lake. And is that being paid for by the developer, or is that beyond Grafton?
Past Grafton,
Okay.
Grafton Lake to Hardy Road would be paid for by the.
Okay, so we got the design, but we haven't figured out how we're gonna pay for that one yet.
No.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilor Wake. Additional questions or comments on the existing programs?
Well, I guess in terms of this, maybe it's gonna be an agenda. No, mine's related to the sewer.
Okay. I'm curious about the roads program. So given that so much money is going to be going into roads and culverts, what's the best line of sight to, or is there a line of sight, or, you know, it's something that I'm unfamiliar with. It's not something that we hear a lot about at the council table, but given that it's going to be such a huge expense, how can we plug into knowing about what's going on there and what's happening with those expenditures to really understand and be literate about them when we're either talking here or out in the community?
Well, it would be helpful because we have advanced the asset management planning for that asset class quite far.
Okay.
So it would probably be helpful to present that information at this committee. Looking at the scope of, if we're talking about culverts, and I did notice I've got it doubled there.
So it's not 2 million next year. That's okay.
It's essentially $1 million a year.
Right.
To catch up to where we need to be.
If I can just quickly
Yes, so that's just 1 million.
Okay.
No.
And if I can just interject, in the 5-year financial plan, basically it's an inclining rate because we know that we've been underfunding roads for the number of roads that we have per capita. It's really high, and or the length of the roads that we have. And so it's basically a gradual increase where in the 5-year plan, we've got it increasing to $2 million 5-year.
Yeah,
And that's inclusive. Yeah, that was inclusive of.
Yeah, Actually, on the roads, I do have a question for you, and it's kind of personal derived, because we live up in Queen Charlotte's, but I think this would apply in other areas. In the road design, as we're improving the road structure, repaving and stuff, would it be, is it possible to increase shoulder width so there's room for pedestrians to walk on a proper shoulder as opposed to having to walk on the road at times, in terms of safety? Are you taking that is that being taken into consideration?
Yeah, in some cases there is, room for that.
In some cases not.
I would say probably in more cases there isn't,
Yeah,
or there would need to be a substantial amount of work done to create extra room.
Yeah.
Extra space.
Yeah.
So it's,
I was just saying, in particular where we live, where if people are walking down to the cove, on the one side, it's a drop off of the barrier, and then the lane, and then probably be more room. You'd have to take the devil you want to associate with, because on the other side, it's the rock fall. But if the shoulders, yeah, anyhow, if you're taking that into account if we're upgrading the roads and the shoulders can at least be, I don't know, a meter of gravel beyond the pavement, that at least gives somebody, they don't have to walk on the road.
And we have looked, Patrick is aware of, there is a very minor program through Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure for shoulders.
Right.
But it's not very generous, and it doesn't really provide much relief for the amount of work that we have to do in most of our roads. The drop-offs are so significant. The amount of material that has to go over the edge to create this, as you know, like the angle of repose for the rock wall is it got to be pretty steep. Otherwise, you end up starting to have just dramatic amounts of material.
Yeah. And what are we using for a typical lane width? 10 feet or 12 feet, 9 feet, 8, not 8?
well, 3.2 meters if it's a full-size road.
2.2, about 11.
Yeah.
It's not just so, if you don't know, on the ferry, it's 9 feet. The lanes on the ferry are 9.
Yeah.
We're used to driving 9. Maybe that's the way. How about shrinking the driving portion to create more shoulder?
Yeah.
People are used to 9 feet if we've driven on the ferry.
Well,
I don't know.
yeah.
It's safe.
Yeah.
Is that, Michael, is that the typical?
Well, it's the speed, it's related to speed as well.
So at 40K, the minimum width for a lane is.
My mind is like 3.2, 3.4, 3.6.
Yeah, then
Especially
you
when
get
you-
trucks.
yeah.
Right.
School buses and
Yeah.
transit, it's like.
And a lot of times it's you're matching what's there. You're essentially resurfacing a road that the whole road with maybe 14 feet.
Right.
So it's obviously not 2 full lanes. It's what it is.
I'm just thinking about Mayor Leonard's comment about getting one of these updated at every meeting, and I wonder if we could add a column for percentage complete, so we get a sense of how we're progressing towards the estimated completion.
Well, that's under status, isn't it? Like Patrick's got 50% not started, high priority. I guess you're gonna have high priority not started. Like under the service yard there, 2025, it's about 50% design complete. You mean like just have an actual figure, like a number?
Well, yeah, like here we've got complete, nearly complete, not started. Maybe something a little more
Like a percentage,
granular.
like a percentage.
Yeah. Is that,
Yeah, I guess we can.
I mean, I'm really thinking about the roads and culverts, because that's the one that, that's really hard to get your head around.
It'll never be complete.
Well, yeah, that's.
It's like those, you know, the Thousand Islands Bridge that I grew up near where they would hire two painters and they would spend a whole year painting the bridge from one end to the other. And then start of the new year, they just
Start again.
start again. Yeah, so, you know, and just to sort of merge the comments from Councilor Wake and Mr. Florendo here, the like budget and schedule are two of the biggest, you know, project management categories. And whether it's a percentage or even just like, you know, being sensitive to creating a ton of work for staff. But I like this would be really helpful, even if there's just a like a red, yellow, green of how we're tracking to budget and schedule.
Yeah.
You know, instead of trying to figure out
Red, yellow, green would be.
63%.
Yeah.
But you know, this is a little behind, or this is tracking fine. I think is a real easily visualizable.
Yeah.
View.
And maybe I'll make one more comment. And again, being sensitive to work for staff, right? Some municipalities on their GIS system, they do have a layer for capital projects. So, and it's not necessarily for the public, it's for staff, right, and council. So maybe because of all the rehab for the culverts and the roads, identifying on a layer, like these are the culverts that are planned for next year, following year, like maybe 3 years in advance. And so then if you're reviewing it, you're like, okay, that makes sense. I know we're gonna have to do some closures. You might see interfaces, I'm sure you've looked at this already, where like, we're gonna redo this road. Hey, but there's these other culverts that are planned for a year or two down the road. Might as well do them now and then find some combinations there. So I don't know if that's behind the scenes, but that would be useful from a capital planning or organizing perspective.
Yeah, there's nothing better than ripping up a road to put in a water main and then next year come in for the sewer.
Yeah, a couple of municipalities that work for it, they do have like, once you've done this road, you can't touch it for another 2 years.
Right.
Because they just don't want the public backlash, right?
Yeah.
So they're very intentional and, okay, we're gonna redo these utilities, you might as well do the road paving at the same time, because we do not wanna come back.
Yeah.
Then perhaps with asset management got mentioned as well, and I know that we're probably due at the council table for an update on asset management, but you know, I think that's something that I can help coordinate for the next committee meeting is even maybe using our roads program as a way into the update on asset management, given that we've already got a handle on that. So that we can look at the plan generally, and then we can look at it in the context of roads and culverts and start to get a sense and some, you know, some insight into where those expenditures are going to be, what it's looking like, because it's almost a, you know, in the last year, Cape Roger Curtis is super loud, but the number of comments, you know, from even teenagers that I get that are like, when are you going to fix the potholes in my road? Is like a, you know, municipal truism for mayors and councilors of, you know, or we had a meeting last week about a road resurfacing request. So I think it would be really helpful for this committee and then in particular council to know, you know, what is happening with this, you know, first big round of investment in our ongoing infrastructure. That makes sense. Something we can talk about, bring forward. Okay, any other pieces on the capital projects review? The hope also for Michael and Don here was that by giving you this material, you've got a, you know, a bird's eye view of everything that's happening in the municipality and some of the costs and some of the general sense of where we are and where we're going. You want to talk about the community center, or should we want to hear about the community center? Not seeing any overjoy for it. So maybe we'll just move on to sewer at this point. Okay. So we've got 6.1 Snug Cove wastewater treatment plant. I had this added to the agenda because it's becoming an increasing topic of conversation. There's a couple of pieces on it. One is where we're at sewer capacity right now, some of the thoughts on what we're going to do about it, places where we might be frozen in taking action, and as well as some policy issues like the development of development cost charges for the sewer area and what that's looking like, and ultimately how we're going to finance this whole thing. So I will turn it over to Patrick, probably with some support here by Liam, just to give us a quick overview of where we're at with the wastewater treatment plant.
Okay, so last year we completed some upgrades to the wastewater treatment plant, essentially adding a large equalization storage tank, tying that into the process. And what that did is essentially caught up to where we were with load on the system, development within the service area. So we still have no capacity to accept additional load, which really compromises development opportunities in some kind of area. Makes it difficult from an official community plan perspective. If there's densification in code, that's a big part of that plan. It's very much servicing limited, what can be achieved. You'll notice that one of the projects on the list, phase 2 wastewater treatment plant upgrades, a $7 million estimated cost to accommodate what we laid out as a 20-year plan for estimated growth in the service area in the next 20 years. There hasn't been development cost charges, so there isn't a fund in place to finance those kinds of upgrades. So there's a really big question around how can that even occur? How can we pull together the money needed for such a major upgrade? And that's remains an unanswered question. The other major issue that we're having with the wastewater treatment plant is the outfall, which failed a number of times last year, had to be repaired. We spent a fair bit on getting divers in to repair it. That's some work done on it. We had an environmental impact study and a pre-design for a new outfall that was done as part of the pre-design for the phase 2 wastewater treatment plant upgrades. So we do need to proceed with that piece. One of the reasons why it's failing the extent it is because it's undersized. It's operates like a force main, has to be pumped. So you get air entrained in the effluent flow, and that causes buckling of the line, ballasts holding it down that break, and the line floats sometimes.
The line's plastic, is that
The
correct?
line's HDP. HDP. Yeah, plastic.
Density.
Polyethylene. So, yeah, it is, and that's something has some more urgency to it because currently we're not operating in compliance with our permit to discharge. And until we place the outfall, that will be the case. So that's yeah, and then I guess the other issue that we struggle with, and we have done a fair bit to improve, is the inflow and infiltration in the system. We're sort of at the point now where we're estimated inflow and infiltration is similar and is in line with what we see around the region. That's our limiting factor for capacity is in the winter time. Typically more rainfall.
And that infiltration is solely because of loose connections on the piping that's been installed, is that?
it could be leakage into the piping. We had quite a bit that was leaking into the manholes.
Oh.
And so those we are able to assess and see and fix.
Right.
The piping itself is a little more difficult. And then there could be a fair bit, and there often is, like sometimes up to 60% of the inflow and infiltration actually occurs on private properties.
No.
So that's either improperly installed or problems with the infrastructure on the property itself, or in some cases, somebody's connected a roof drain to storm sewer or something like
Right.
that. Number of sources that could be. So
Is there any remediation that the municipality can regulate, or I don't want to use the word impose, but bring to bear on the properties where it's felt that it's not properly done or something?
I'm not sure what tools we have for enforcement. There probably would be something, but the biggest difficulty is identifying where the issues are occurring. It's underground infrastructure, so
You'd probably have to use a dye of some sort or something.
you can do dye tests.
Smoke testing is one of the more common ones for sewer. And I've heard reports that there was smoke testing done on Kate's Hill. That won't go up, but essentially you charge the lines full of smoke, and then if you've got big cracks in your line from your house to the sewer main across your front yard, you would see smoke coming up through your lawn. Or if your downspout is connected to the main, you would see smoke come through your eavesdrops.
So is that a chemical? Is that like a CO2 smoke or?
Yeah, it's a non-toxic smoke. It's alarming for people to see.
Yeah.
But
But if it's pointing to a problem, it's.
one of the things that Patrick has worked on with our consulting engineers on doing analysis on the inflow and infiltration rates for our system. And so prior to correcting the I can't remember how many manholes or other obvious areas of infiltration that were occurring. Our ratio of I&I was high for our municipal system, but since that work has been completed, we're told that the ratio is now in line with what one would expect with a municipal system, and we can continue to chase down the remaining I&I, but you start to get diminishing returns for costs. So it becomes a question of how much do we want to spend to chase down these smaller I&I issues, which would increase capacity versus saving that money towards increasing capacity right at the plant.
Would it be worthwhile at all looking at the different areas of the system? Because I would imagine Kate's Hill and Foxglove, would have much more modern connections to the sewer versus the business areas down in. I understand I'm not an engineer. I don't have a technical background, so this is just probably an open wondering, but whether looking for I&I in the main Snug Cove strip where all of those connections are existing, and I'm sure there's Councillor Saunders, welcome.
Hi.
It's not just an off camera.
Yeah. So whether there would be a higher propensity for infiltration hotspots in an area of Snug Cove where those, they might not be sealed, they might be super old connections, and if there's a way to chase that down at all.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, older parts of the system would be tend to be more at risk for infiltration. So if we were investing more effort and trying to target that, that would probably be a good way to break it down, is to focus more the older part of the system. Correct.
Has there been any flow monitoring studies to segregate different parts of the system to see, you know, we've done flow monitoring over here, for this area of this system, this part of the system is in line where we would expect it based on the modeling, and then versus this one where it's like, well, there's a ton of flow coming through this area to identify maybe the bigger pieces.
Yeah, we haven't, we've just recently installed a flow monitor on the gravity system, so the Kate's Hill portion. And then we've got, we don't have a flow monitor, but we've got pump records for the Snugco pump station. And then we've got the other pump station on Miller Road. We do have that information that we could do some analysis.
Yeah.
All that hasn't.
Didn't Urban Systems do some analysis? It was like almost 2 years ago now when we were looking at that. I remember we met with Brad Hawthorne and others, and we looked at some of the pump flow records and did some analysis on that. And then I know our operators have walked the gravity lines at times of day when you wouldn't expect there to be flows. And so this is the kind of old school way where you literally open up a manhole cover and you listen for flow. And
Or you actually see it there and you're like, wait a minute, it's dry.
flow there, and then you try to isolate, like, well, we walk further up to the next manhole and wait, there's no flow here, so it's got to be coming between.
So do we have some kind of buffer to allow for like a major rain event? Do we have extra capacity, or are we at full capacity? As you say, we're at full capacity now. So if we had a big rain event, would we have an overflow event?
We wouldn't have an overflow. What we can see and what we have seen recently, and this was has just recently occurred, is we did have a discharge that was exceeding what our permitted discharge amount is. So we do have the big equalization tank, which provides a significant buffer in most conditions. If you have a prolonged heavy rainfall, multiple days, you can get into a situation where that tank is full.
Right.
Essentially haven't got that buffer anymore. And the operator is forced to put as much as he can through the system.
Is that automated? Is that done automatically?
It's
Is there
automated.
a sensor that senses and then says, oh, the pump's got a RPM and the pump's got to increase, or does somebody physically have to go and?
It's automated to an extent.
Huh.
Some of the settings have to be changed manually, so.
So there's an alarm that goes off that says buffer tank's full, and somebody has to go and
Yeah.
do the thing.
How often a year do we have an exceedance?
We've had one. That was just recent. I don't believe we had any last year.
And that one was in a recent storm event. We did have some big rains in the last couple of weeks.
It was, our flow records, it was at the end of January.
Okay.
It did correlate with significant rainfall.
So the equalization tank can look after changes in flow, in regular flow during the 24-hour period. If you have higher flow, then the tank goes up and then goes down. So but it also has that extra capacity is what I was asking about to allow for quite a bit of stormwater.
Yeah, it has quite a bit of capacity for whatever form wastewater flow is, whether it's made up of stormwater or, well, it's always a combination. Filtration.
Is everything going through that buffer tank before it gets into the processing system? Does everything go into that buffer tank and then?
Sometimes it doesn't, it just, if it's, the system's operating at a lower level of flow, it will just operate as normal.
Well, through
It
the
won't
main,
lead
through the
off.
main holding tank, and then there's a valve that would open that. Or how does what initiates the buffer, the holding tank? To
If you've
start
got-
filling.
If you've got too much flow coming in,
Okay,
it would start bleeding some of it off.
I see. And is that pressurized or
Tank?
the
No,
bleed off? There's a by gravity.
no, it's pumped.
Oh,
Yeah.
so it's pressure. So it's pressure, then it's held there and then that drains back into the system.
And then it's, then it's fed back.
Okay.
So getting to the issue of where do we find $7 million for this? Just this week, a new $6 billion Canada Housing Infrastructure Fund, including $1 billion for municipalities for urgent infrastructure needs such as water, wastewater, stormwater, and solid waste infrastructure. Sounds like we should be going for that.
So this speaks a bit to my past experiences in negotiating those types of agreements with the province. And so thankfully, BC is usually ahead of the curve. And so that access to that fund is first tied to the provinces signing an agreement by January 1st with the federal government. And if the provinces don't sign an agreement, then the federal government says they'll flow funds directly to municipalities, which they've said before. But the province of BC will act quickly and probably be the first signatory. I mean, I don't know, they generally are. And then that's a good thing because the province will likely be required to kick in matching funding so that it increase the allocation. But the allocations are based on population and BC represents about 12% of the national population. So 12% of 1 billion is 120 million. Then if the province kicks in another matching, you make it 240. But then that's spread across all 189 municipal or local governments. So it's great news. When I talked with the mayor about it, I was pretty excited because it's like, this is exactly what we need. I want to temper expectations around the amount that it actually will translate to for BC and it'll be very competitive. We know our neighbors just across the way have some significant wastewater challenges that will be.
But I heard the minister speak about that, the federal minister saying, we don't fund overages. You had a budget, we put in our funding. So
Perfect.
I don't think that one's gonna.
Perfect. Well, that's good to hear. But it is a really important thing for us to be keeping our eye on and, making putting our best case forward as soon as possible. And if the province does enter into agreement with the federal government by January 1st, the program would probably roll out later that spring or summer. And then, maybe if they move quickly, we're looking at decisions next winter. Eventually, it would move into 2026. But still, good news, because it sounds like that could be a program that would support this project. Historically, the infrastructure programs don't support projects that are predominantly based on expansion for growth. There is a priority matrix that the province has, ranking from 1 to 10, and expansion for growth is the lowest in the ranking. So, but it sounds like this program from the federal government is expressly for housing, to support housing, so it could be really good for us.
Urgent themes.
We'll definitely be putting our hand up.
So, given the timing you just talked about, and it won't actually be decided on probably for another year. And we know we need this, would it be worth pursuing some free municipal funding just to actually plan, design what we need, determine what we need, do a feasibility study? Or is, like, how did we get that 7 million figure? Is that just a ballpark sort of estimate, or is that based on a design?
Yeah, we had a preliminary design report was completed. So it's based on that.
So is that,
The Green Municipal Fund might be a good way to try to get some planning funding, as you suggest. So I think that's something we can look into further about, okay, if we're ready to do more detailed costing, then, or look at smaller phases, because that could be an option too. This expansion that we've explored is a 20-year growth expansion. Correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's about a 20-year. But maybe we want to look at like a smaller growth expansion that's money as an alternative option. Maybe a 10-year, what does that look like? It won't be half. This half the capacity doesn't result in half the cost. But
Yeah, I think I'm going to wrap up the discussion here, just looking at the clock. The intention of the materials provided here and for the committee to review is to put the Snug Cove sewer issue just into our awareness, because it's going to be an ongoing issue. I'll coordinate a little bit with the committee in future, as well as likely council, to organize a site visit to the sewer facility as well, or the wastewater treatment plant as well, including the various pump stations, so everybody can have a ground truth sense of where the various components are, what they look like, some of the considerations moving forward, and then also bring forward some sort of plan with staff to get a sense of like, what are the next steps? And I think really, given the magnitude and cost of the project, we're not sure where to go. And whether we want to look at optimizing the system through infiltration, whether we want to start some form of design, whether we want to chase grants. I think these are all open questions right now that need to have some thoughtful discussion to figure out, okay, well, like what can be done and what are ultimately our objectives in moving this forward. Nothing in other business. I'll look for a mover to move to a closed meeting immediately pursuing the open meeting, pursuant to sections 91K of the community charter. Can I have a mover for that recommendation? Moved by Mr. Florendo, seconded by Councillor Saunders. John's here now. He's stealing your thunder. All in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Aye. That carries unanimously. Without objection, we'll receive the information items in section 7. And it's consent. Any members of the public here for question period? Any? Next meeting, we have that tentatively scheduled on our agenda. With that, I will look for a motion to adjourn. Oh, almost Councillor Getty in the back. Moved by Councillor Saunders, second by Councillor Wake.